All right, welcome back to another episode of our legislative interview series. I'm Kevin Scorsone. Joining me today is Raleigh City Council member Jane Harrison. Jane, thanks so much for doing this. We always appreciate collaborating with you, and we appreciate your time. First thing I wanted to talk about was the housing issues in Raleigh. It's a top priority for our realtor members, certainly. How do you think that will be addressed here in the coming years, hopefully sooner rather than later? But what's your take on the housing inventory issues, specifically housing affordability and inventory?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me be part of this conversation. I think housing affordability is just absolutely essential across the triangle right now, and the U.S. We're dealing with this issue, and unfortunately, with our current economic climate, I don't expect it to get easier anytime soon. With the high interest rates and the rapid, inflationary pressures that we have had, it's very tough to return back to the market that we might have had, a decade ago. And as I always, remind folks is, to bring those prices down. In a place like the Triangle, that means some kind of, really a failure, an economic market implosion, which nobody generally wants. That's not good for jobs and for our incomes and all of that. So at this point, we kind of are where we are with the marketplace. I think what I am hoping to see, though, is some stability and a little bit of a flattening out. So the rapid growth that we've experienced, especially in the last 5 years, I don't anticipate that to continue at quite the same pace. I do have a background in economics, and so I do try to follow these issues as much as I can, in terms of changing marketplace, but, in terms of, what can we do about it, right? So we've got macroeconomic issues that we don't have any power over, but what can we do at the local level? And so I think about really 3 different ways to address housing affordability, and those are supply, subsidy, and stability in the marketplace. So first, supply. I think this is what most economists would agree is important. We do have to increase supply to meet demand, to keep prices steady. But because this is such a popular, wonderful place to live, demand continues to increase as well. So keeping up with that demand in a high interest climate that makes it harder to build and, to find lenders, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be an easy thing to keep up with that demand. And what we're also seeing is the demand that is coming, especially from other places with people moving here, they're often coming with incomes that are higher than our current average income. So our area median income has risen quite a bit. So, beyond, the marketplace, the private marketplace, which certainly is important, we've got to increase supply so that we have, really every kind of home available on what I think of as, kind of an economic ladder. Folks who want to rent, they need a safe, secure rental. Folks who want to buy their first kind of starter home with a townhome or a condo, that needs to be available. We want to have single family homes and residences for, families that are looking for that picket fence and, place for their kids to play. For folks that are retiring or downsizing, making sure that they have an exit if they want to move out of, a larger home and downsize. So all of these different, kind of options we really do need in the marketplace. So beyond supply, of these different types, I'm also thinking quite a bit about subsidy. So what is the role that government plays to subsidize some of our housing options and to bring prices down. So typically the way that works is, the city of Raleigh, we have funds at our disposal, both through local tax dollars. We have a penny 1 cent property tax that goes to affordable housing, as well as we had an affordable housing bond for $80 million that passed in 2020. And then we've got some additional funds through the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds, that, we're actually right now figuring out how to purchase the DMV property. This is a state DMV property in New Bern Avenue in East Raleigh. It's a $20 million property that then we can build affordable housing with a partner, and keep it, affordable into perpetuity. So when I'm talking about these, city funds, how they get used, we are providing gap financing for projects that provide affordable housing. So we're working with nonprofit developers as well as private developers to get those units built on site. And in that process, we're able to support folks that are at, let's say, 60%, earning 60% of area median income. Also, we can support folks that are earning 30% of area median income. And some projects also include those earning 80% of area median income. Typically, best practices are really to mix up the income levels in a project so that we're not concentrating any one income group together, but that we have, again, that diversity of options, in a community and in a neighborhood. So just going one more beyond, subsidy. I've talked about supply and subsidy. I also want to talk about stability in the marketplace. And so I think this is one topic that doesn't get as much discussion at times, and it is a little confusing in terms of the tools that are available to us. We ultimately have to have state authority from the General Assembly to implement, a lot of our kind of, housing regulations to help keep people in their homes. And so when I talk about stability, I'm talking about services, say for tenants who are going to be evicted, making sure that they have proper legal advice. And so representation, if they are getting perhaps evicted from their apartment for, something that maybe can be ameliorated or mitigated. I'm also talking about, rent stabilization. So one thing that we saw, especially since 2020, is this rapid increase in prices. And so there are, a lot of cities and states throughout the US that basically limit price gouging. So they might say, we can't allow 20% increase year over year. There's got to be some max. So when I talk about stabilization measures, I don't mean to say we're going to overregulate the market, but we do need sometimes a tool just to kind of keep us from going off the deep end.
Yeah. That's all great. And I appreciate your insight to that, because I think it's important to lay it out like that. And it sounds like, there is answers to some of these questions that people have been asking. I guess one thing that I wanted to follow up with was I spoke recently, actually earlier today. I did one of these interviews with a gentleman named Stephen Peterson, who is an economist at the University of Idaho, and he is doing a national housing study. And he agrees with you that this isn't just a regional issue. So people here in Raleigh or in North Carolina shouldn't get frustrated that this is a national issue that we're dealing with. What he did mention, though, was that there are a couple of locations in the country. One he mentioned being Houston, as sort of figuring this out to where there's still affordable housing, but there's still this sort of booming metropolitan area where people can go, and the way of life is nice. The cost of living is still affordable. Is there any concern, just from your standpoint, you sort of see this from the city council level, but also being a citizen of Raleigh and also working with people at NC State who are about to join the job force? Do you see any concern with people looking for other options? I mean, we want to keep people here in Raleigh, but number one, I guess, do you get concerned with people looking for other states or other cities like Houston, Texas, or even getting a job in Raleigh, but having to go live 45 minutes to an hour away and not really being a part of the community that they work What's your
Yeah,
feeling on that?
no, it's a great question. I do work at NC State, and I'm a faculty member there and teach college students. So I'm often thinking about this, next generation, where are they going to live? How can they afford these rents? I couldn't have afforded them when I was in college. And so, I do think it's important, again, that we have a healthy, housing marketplace that does work for all income levels, because otherwise what we risk is losing some of our talent, losing folks that are, maybe they're just getting started in their careers and they say, yeah, I can't afford this. Or people who are working, essential jobs, daycare workers, teachers, firefighters, who say, I think I'll go work, in another county, and live close to my job. And so that is something I think about quite a bit when it comes to, the city of Raleigh, our employees. We have 4,000 employees. These are the people that pick up our trash, that make sure that our roads are safe, that take care of our parks. And so if they can't afford to live here, how are we going to ensure that we have the workforce to get the real work done? So I think, we still have a relatively healthy marketplace in that, a lot of folks are comfortable, say living in Garner or living in Wendell, being a little bit outside of Raleigh, finding, again, what works for them in the marketplace, and, commuting a little bit. But there is a point, where, that commute does become untenable for people. And that's something we certainly want to avoid.
Yeah, it's a good, I'm glad you brought that up, because I just feel like this issue sort of gets glazed over unless you're involved in it. But I was talking to my neighbor the other day, he is a middle school phys ed teacher, and his wife is an elementary school teacher. And they basically were saying that, they bought their house here a long time ago. But they basically said that if they were starting out now, that a house wouldn't be an option, that it would be that they would have to rent in order to work close to their schools and want to be a part of that community. And I feel for those people, because I think it's super important to have your community be filled with the people that work in it, that want to give back to the children or the people that need help in that community. So I think it's even changed over the last few years. I mean, you and I both have moved to this state from other states, but I feel like when I moved here, the median household income, which in Raleigh I think is around $75,000, that probably would have seemed a little bit more affordable than it does today. I think with the continuing price increases of housing, it becomes a little bit daunting for people. So I totally.
And the new builds that are out there, a lot of them, even at, kind of the lower rates, are, 120%, 140% of AMI when you think about the costs. And so then people are, spending more than 30% of their income on housing, which is kind of the general rule of thumb from the federal government to say that you are housing cost burdened. And then at that point, it's like, okay, now I've got to make hard choices about what food to buy and healthcare, and how do I get around? All of those pieces start to become more challenging.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the things that gets overlooked too, is that I mean, when I bought my home, I certainly overlooked it. Can you afford the mortgage? Yeah, maybe you're feeling all right about that, but there's so much more that goes into buying a house, with upkeep and bills and taxes. So that is why, unfortunately, I think that there is, not unfortunately, but we want to see, from our association, we want to see more people owning homes. But frankly, that's why renting is such a popular option right now, because you aren't spending as much money, and you get to keep a lot of that money that you have in savings. The down payments on houses can wipe out people's savings before you even get into the house. So.
Yeah, hopefully if we can get inflation under control, we'll see the housing market, kind of be more accessible, at least a little more than it is right now.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to ask you something that's super interesting to me, just from my time living in New York, I sort of was accustomed to mass transit and bus systems and the subway and that sort of stuff. How important do you think how important is it, do you think, for this area to get some type of mass transit in order to then at that point, maybe living 45 minutes away from Raleigh really isn't a big deal if you can hop on mass transit and get there. Then you still feel like a part of the community. It's a quick commute. You're not dealing with the traffic. How important would those types of advancements be in this area? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it makes me think of parts of England and Scotland where, yeah, you can take the train out and live in kind of almost like a little rural hamlet,
Right.
but then come back in for work and everything that you need.
The best of both worlds in a sense.
Yeah. Right now we're very car centric. We have a couple options when it comes to rail. So a couple different lines. We've looked at commuter rail, really across the triangle. So from like southeast Wake County, basically to the Johnson County border, going through all the way through Durham. And then there's another line, the S line, that goes basically north-south through Raleigh area. And then we have bus rapid transit. So bus rapid transit are dedicated bus lanes that Raleigh is investing in, going, all four directions, cardinal directions, west, south, east, north. And the bus rapid transit, I will say, is really our lowest hanging fruit in terms of making an investment in this space, because they require dedicated lanes, but it has nothing to do with train tracks. And as I've been told, the folks who run the railroads in the U.S. are kind of like God, and they decide what happens with them. It is not an easy process, bureaucratically to handle, kind of making changes and adding new lines, especially for passenger rail, because you are competing with rail that moves goods around. And so oftentimes those rail lines that are moving goods that we need, they have priority. So then you don't always get to go as fast as you need to go if you're trying to commute to get to work. Plus the cost for rail has really become so high that I think we're going to struggle to make that investment at this time. Over $3 billion is what is expected if we were to do that line from Durham all the way down to southeast Wake County. I think it would be an amazing investment. And we do have some monies that we have been saving over the years through, we have a transit tax. And so we keep those monies for, developing transit. But again, the bus rapid transit would be a much more affordable way to make those investments. And it's also not quite as permanent. These rail lines, you only have so many options. You kind of have to go with where the lines exist. And, maybe or maybe not, that is where your population centers are that need to connect. Right. So again, the bus rapid transit gives us more flexibility.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think some type of mass transit is certainly welcomed by most people in the area. The last question I have for you today is, we've already been talking for about 20 minutes and I want to get your weekend started for you. Advocacy is a major talking point, but as an elected official, does it change your view when you see groups and organizations not only speaking about it, but putting in the work with other initiatives and fundraising to support their agenda, and getting in contact with you and your colleagues at the city council, and just continually looking for that type of collaboration?
Yeah, I really appreciate any groups reaching out. So whether that's neighbors or organizations, businesses, anybody who has, a vested interest in something going on in the city of Raleigh, if you reach out, I will set up a meeting. I want to hear, where you're coming from, what your needs are, so that I can really kind of integrate that into my thinking, because we are making decisions one after the next after the next at our city council meetings. I mean, the decision fatigue is real. It is really a gauntlet of decisions we have to make, and they're very important, and I do my best to really look at all sides of issues, to reconcile, different interest groups, concerns. But if I've never heard from someone, or, we don't have a relationship, then I can't kind of put that in my box of ideas and knowledge. So yeah, I really appreciate these types of conversations. And I always just, recommend anyone who would like to take the time, please set up a meeting.
Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and for all of your help and your willingness to take time out of your day to talk with us as you have over these last few months. So thank you so much. And we appreciate everything that you're doing at the City Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.